They dug up the lighthouse at dawn and found teeth, more than bones. A necklace of human teeth threaded on a strip of leather like a child's crown. The diver who brought them up vomited in the sand. The headline on the rescue boat's radio was silence. The crew pretended the necklace was an old fisherman's talisman and kept loading crates. But someone on the pier looked at the string and read. The tiny grooves carved into enamel, letters that were not any language the man had learned. The letters spelled the thing that had whispered from the darkness 3 nights earlier. Strike her again, the cub said, and we'll wear your teeth as bracelets. You feel the sentence in your throat, metallic and wrong, because the voice that spoke it had a child's cadence and the geometry of an ocean you have never seen. They call it a lighthouse, but the structure had never meant to warn ships. The beams were a throat that inhaled. The townspeople had been losing time, minutes, then hours from their lives. A baker would remember kneading dough and then look up to discover the oven cold. A schoolteacher would finish a lesson and find the chalkboard empty of everything she had written. Only one woman, Mara, kept having the same scrap of a dream. A cub with glass black eyes smiling in a ruined nursery, whispering about teeth. She didn't sleep anymore, because sleep was where the whisper became a map. On the 3rd night, Mara stayed on the dock with an old reel-to-reel tape recorder she could no longer justify owning. The recorder was a piece of the past. She told herself that was why she had it, like carrying fire into a damp cave. The lighthouse swung its light and closed its palm. Waves pressed in like a crowd at a burial. At 2:13 a.m., the recorder clicked on of its own accord, and a voice thin as a razor, but undeniably human, spoke a line that made her body betray her. Strike her again, the cub said, and we'll wear your teeth as bracelets. Then the sound split, as if 2 things had inhaled the same breath. One was the child's voice. The other was an older voice speaking in a machine of echoes. We are borrowing the hours you owe us. You will return them. Mara pulled the recorder closer and cried into the wind. What would you do if this happened to you? Tell me below. There is no protocol for a theft of time. There is no manual titled How to Steal Back an Afternoon. The town's mayor sent men in suits who took photographs, asked polite questions, and then left with the teeth tucked into a briefcase that smelled like antiseptic. They said they would consult scientists. They said they would bring logic. Inside the recorder, the child's voice counted off numbers that were not decimal. 3 thin clicks. A pause, then a pattern that repeated like a lullaby. Whoever, or whatever, was keeping time here did not understand clocks. It understood rhythm. The next morning, the baker found his oven full of cold bread and a child's shoe in the flour. The shoe was small, leather soaked with seaweed and the kind of salt that tastes like an old promise. When Mara showed the tape to the town sheriff, his nostrils flared and his mouth tightened into an apology he did not have again to give. We cover this. We bury it, he said. But burying does not erase a pattern. Burying is what lets patterns eat deeper. By dusk, a group of teenagers had gathered, driven by a crucible of curiosity and the internet's dark appetite for the uncanny. They called themselves explorers, but brought flashlights that never behaved the same twice beneath the lighthouse. One boy filmed with a phone that fuzzed into static when his finger brushed his collarbone. Another felt the hair on his arm rise and discovered in the mirror that a small braid of hair at the nape of his neck had been wound with a thread of human teeth. Small, milk-white, and impossible. He pulled them free and dropped them into the sand. The teeth hummed like a bee trapped in amber. Now the story was moving through us like a parasite or a prophecy. People began to find little tokens, buttons etched with tiny notches, stitches on clothes rearranged into patterns that matched the grooves on the teeth. The museum donated a case to display the necklace. Visitors came and left with an extra hour on their watches and an ache in their gut. The necklace was placed under glass, but glass is a poor guard. At midnight, the lights above the exhibit dipped, and the image on the security monitor folded into nonsense. A landscape of teeth pressed against a dark sky. The recorder in Mara's hands began to play of its own accord. The cub's voice counted again. The town's air tasted old, like a room that has been closed for 100 years with a book left open on the table. Do you think this was real, or something else entirely? Comment what you believe. The question is not rhetorical. The town wanted to know whether to arming themselves with torches or prayers. The sheriff wanted to know whether to call men with big coats and tape and gadgets. Mara wanted to know whether to follow the pattern carved into the teeth, the tiny letters that were not any alphabet she'd seen, or to burn the necklace and pretend she had never held proof that time could be stolen. She chose to walk toward the lighthouse alone, tape recorder silent now, because proof is a fragile thing and courage is heavier than you think. A child stood on the stairs, a silhouette over the sea, hair shining with fish scale light, singing the pattern in a tongue that made the algae on the rocks stand up like grass. Beside the child, the oldest lighthouse lens turned without a hand. Around them, the sea had learned a new patience. Mara stepped into the light and felt hours unfasten from her sleeves. 1, 2, 3, until she could no longer remember whether she had ever been anything other than the person on the stairs. The child's voice tilted its head like a cub listening for bones. The lighthouse hadn't been built by human hands. That was the first truth the engineers whispered when the government finally arrived and began to dig beneath its foundations. Concrete shouldn't sing, metal shouldn't breathe, but every drill that touched the base sent a sound through the earth, a harmonic tremor that felt like it was rewriting the air itself. One man bled from his ears and kept drilling until he collapsed, smiling, as if he'd been forgiven by something he didn't understand. The project was halted after 40 minutes. 40 minutes that no one remembered living. Mara wasn't seen for 3 days. The search parties found her recorder washed up in a tide pool, its tape spool tangled in seaweed, still spinning though the batteries were long dead. When they played it back in the control tent, the voice on it wasn't hers. It was deeper, plural. She saw the cub, it said. The cub saw her. The pact has begun again. The last word dragged on too long, stretched until it became almost music. The audio tech vomited and refused to touch the machine again. At night, the engineers heard movement in the tunnels below like claws on glass. The floodlights flickered, their glow bending inward toward the lighthouse as if drawn by gravity. Seagulls stopped flying near the coast, and the air smelled of ozone and burnt coral. The townspeople, who once ignored the tower, began to whisper prayers when they passed it. Old prayers, the kind no one remembered teaching them. And then the children began drawing. They drew the same thing, a tall shape with too many arms and a mouth like a cracked bell, standing beside a small creature with round eyes and a necklace of teeth. The children called it the cub, and when asked who told them about it, they all answered the same. She did, but no one could say who she was. The teachers burned the drawings. The next morning, the walls of the school were covered in them again, drawn in salt. Mara finally appeared at the edge of town, barefoot, her pupils blown wide as eclipses. She said she had seen the light from inside. "It's not a light," she whispered. "It's a wound. Something's trying to come through." Her voice was wrong, echoed, like there was another tone layered beneath her own, speaking the same words half a second later. She clutched a small object wrapped in a wet handkerchief. Inside was another tooth, newer than the rest, still pink at the root. "It's growing," she said. "It's learning us." What would you do if someone came back like that, changed, haunted, carrying proof that something unnatural was learning to imitate you? Would you run or listen? Tell me below. They took Mara to a hospital miles inland. Within 24 hours, the staff began reporting dreams of the sea whispering their names. The monitors in the ICU started displaying shapes instead of heartbeats, spirals, circles, something that looked like an alphabet of hunger. On the second night, Mara vanished from her bed. The security camera caught a brief flicker, her silhouette walking toward the window, and a second shape rising behind her, translucent with too many fingers. Then the screen went black. Back at the coast, the lighthouse light changed color. It no longer rotated, it pulsed. Every pulse sent a low vibration across the town, like a heartbeat sinking to something beneath the earth. The mayor ordered an evacuation. Some people made it to the highway before their cars stopped working, dashboard clocks reversing direction. Others never left their houses. They simply went quiet. Their bodies found later serene and smiling, their mouths packed with sand. One drone sent by the government captured the last known footage before the signal was lost. It showed the lighthouse door open and a narrow figure stepping out, Mara, or what was left of her. The cub walked beside her, its eyes reflecting the light like deep water. She held the string of teeth in her hands, and as she looked up toward the drone's camera, her mouth moved. The words were silent, But those who reviewed the footage swore they could hear them in their heads. "Strike her again," she mouthed. "And we'll wear your teeth as bracelets." The next moment the screen turned white. The drone fell into the sea. Do you think this was real or something else entirely? Comment what you believe, because if it was real, if Mara was right, then something ancient was never sleeping. Beneath us, it was waiting to be remembered. Weeks later, the shoreline receded 10 feet overnight. Divers who went down found what looked like ruins, arches of bone, smooth and enormous, humming at a frequency the human ear couldn't fully process. One diver surfaced screaming about faces in the silt, about eyes opening in the dark. His final words before dying from decompression were the same words carved on the lighthouse teeth. The cub remembers. What would you do if you were the last one left to remember? The ocean has a memory longer than the sky, and somewhere on a forgotten frequency, Mara's recorder still plays the same loop, the child's voice counting, patient waiting. When the ocean began whispering names, no one noticed at first. The sound rode on the wind, soft as static, like radio snow drifting through the fog. Fishermen said it was nothing more than air trapped in old pipes beneath the pier. But at night the tide pulled back farther than it ever had, and the sand beneath the lighthouse shimmered, alive, pulsing, as if something was breathing through it. They fenced off the area, of course. Scientists arrived, speaking in tight-clipped words about magnetic anomalies and acoustic phenomena, but their instruments failed, every gauge spinning out into gibberish, every compass pointing directly toward the lighthouse, even when they turned their backs to it. That's when the youngest researcher, a woman named Dr. Kira Salas, made the mistake of listening to Mara's tapes. Kira locked herself in a field tent for nearly 8 hours, headphones pressed tight, replaying the warped whispers until her nose bled. The others found her at dawn, staring at the recorder, her eyes unblinking, pupils narrow as pinpoints. She told them she'd heard the cub speak directly to her, that it had told her a secret, how to open the lighthouse's true door. Later that night, she took a flashlight and walked alone down to the shore. The security feed caught her silhouette against the beam, hair whipping in the wind. She crouched, touched the sand, and whispered a word none of them could translate. The ground flexed beneath her palm, then split open like a lid unsealing. She didn't scream. She smiled as the light swallowed her. What would you do if someone you knew vanished into the earth right in front of you without a sound? Without resistance? Would you chase them into the dark? Tell me below. The next morning her tent was gone too. Not packed, not blown away, gone. The grass where it had stood was fused into a glassy black disk, warm to the touch. The scientists tried to report it, but every satellite transmission was intercepted by something, repeating a single phrase over and over, in a dozen frequencies. The cub is awake. The military arrived within days. They brought floodlights, drills, containment tents. They covered the beach in steel and protocol. But when night fell, the lights turned inward again, bending toward the lighthouse just as before. Cameras caught figures walking along the surf, tall, flickering things that cast no reflection in the water. They looked human until they moved. Too smooth, too fluid, as if their bones were rearranging with every step. By the end of that week, half the base was evacuated. The others who stayed stopped sleeping. They said they could feel vibrations in their teeth. Some began to bleed from the gums, small ivory fragments pushing through the flesh as if their own teeth were multiplying. One soldier cut his palms open, trying to dig them out. Inside were not teeth at all, but tiny white stones engraved with markings identical to those on the lighthouse necklace. It was Mara who appeared again in the surveillance footage, standing beneath the rotating beam, now bright enough to cut shadows into the clouds. Her body was thinner, her movements slow and deliberate. The cub walked beside her, its head tilted in rhythm with hers. And though the feed had no sound, the techs monitoring it all claimed they could hear her voice through the speakers, faint but clear. You shouldn't have built here. You built over a mouth. They sent a response team down, men in hazard suits carrying cameras. They made it 30 feet inside before the air itself changed color, thickened, like honey suspended in light. One of the men began reciting a number sequence that no one recognized, voice trembling but steady. Another started to hum, the same rhythm heard in Mara's tapes. The third man, the youngest, dropped to his knees, sobbing that something was showing him the nursery. The feed cut out. Do you think this was real or something else entirely? Comment what you believe. Because when they recovered the team's bodies, they weren't dead. They were fossilized, perfectly preserved in glassy shells of salt, faces peaceful, eyes wide open. After that, the government sealed the site and erased it from every map. The town was condemned, its residents relocated. But you can't move a sound, and the sound followed. People hundreds of miles inland began hearing the whisper through their plumbing, their phone lines, even the white noise between radio stations. "Strike her again," it would say, softly, almost pleading. "Strike her again and we'll wear your teeth as bracelets." The signal grew stronger each year, carried by storms. Then one night, a fishing trawler off the coast of Greenland picked up an SOS on a private frequency. The voice was female, calm. "This is Mara," it said. "He's learning to speak in our mouths now. The cub's growing fast. Don't come looking for me, you'll only feed it." And then silence. What would you do if you heard that broadcast tonight? Would you believe her? Would you turn it off or listen till the end? Tell me below. Because here's the thing. Sometimes when the wind is right and the sea is quiet, people still hear the faintest sound beneath the waves. Not the tide, not the gulls. A child's voice counting slowly. 1, 2, 3. Waiting for someone to answer back. They found the last recording 6 months later. A buoy had washed ashore 200 miles from where the lighthouse once stood. Its solar panels cracked, its casing twisted like something had chewed through it from the inside. The device was still blinking red, alive, transmitting on a loop. When they opened it, inside was a small waterproof drive labeled in smeared ink, for whoever remembers. The first 20 seconds were static. Then came the sound of water, steady, rhythmic like breath. Beneath it, a voice emerged. Not Mara's. Deeper, older. It spoke English the way a storm mimics speech, words bending under the weight of something colossal trying to fit through them. "We were here before the sea," it said. "We made teeth to speak, you made them to bite." Then silence, and after that the faintest echo, a child's laughter echoing through metal corridors. The file ended with coordinates. When a private salvage team followed them, they discovered an island that shouldn't have existed. It wasn't on any satellite maps, but it rose from the fog like a scar, dark and slick, riddled with holes that pulsed faint light. At the center stood what looked like the remains of the lighthouse, only taller now, bone-white and humming. Around it, the sand was covered in footprints that didn't match any human anatomy. The team's leader, Daniel Cole, kept his camera rolling as they approached the base. The walls were alive, breathing, flexing. The surface shimmered between stone and skin. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "It's growing." He touched it, and the light responded like recognition. The cub's voice filled the air. "Welcome back." One by one, the others turned their lights outward. Every beam reflected hundreds of shapes moving in the mist. Figures tall and thin, each with a necklace of teeth glinting like pearls. The sound that followed wasn't a roar or a scream. It was laughter, layered, hundreds of voices blending into a single vibration that rattled the bones. The camera fell. When authorities recovered the footage weeks later, there were no bodies, just teeth. Piles of them arranged in spirals across the beach, all engraved with the same words. "The mouth is open. What would you do if you stood there, alone, facing something that had learned to wear your voice, your face, your memories? Would you try to speak to it, or run before it learned your name?" Tell me below. By the following year, the tides had changed. Satellite images showed a dark bloom spreading through the Atlantic, a slow spiral centered on that island. Marine biologists claimed it was plankton reacting to heat, but at night, the bloom glowed faintly, tracing patterns that looked like veins, a heartbeat large enough to fill the sea. Then came the disappearances, ships lost without a distress call, whales washing up with human teeth in their stomachs, divers returning to the surface speaking languages they didn't know. Governments denied everything, of course, but audio logs leaked online. Recordings of the ocean itself whispering coordinates, names, and one recurring phrase. "We're wearing them now." Mara's voice resurfaced too. Somewhere on the shortwave bands between 7.1 and 7.3 megahertz, Listeners reported hearing her at odd hours, her voice layered beneath static, calm as ever. "It's not coming anymore," she said once. "It's here, inside. The cub isn't a child, it's an inheritance." Then a pause. "If you're hearing me, don't look at the water. It looks back. Do you think this was real or something else entirely? Comment what you believe, because every myth starts somewhere, and this one maybe never ended." Last week, a coastal monitoring buoy near Nova Scotia picked up an unfamiliar pattern in the sonar. Not a creature, not a ship. Something vast, hollow, rhythmic. The sound wasn't echoing. It was calling. The technicians joked that the ocean was whispering again, but when they slowed the audio by half, a voice emerged beneath the waves. Soft. Familiar. A child's voice. "One," it said. "Two." Then a pause. "Your turn. If you put your ear to a shell tonight, you might hear it. A faint counting beneath the roar of the sea, something ancient and patient waiting for the echo of your breath. The lighthouse is gone, but its light, its wound, still glows beneath the water, humming, learning, remembering." The cub's laughter drifts through the tides, threading the world together one voice at a time. Maybe it's already found you. Maybe, even now, something small and unseen is whispering behind your teeth, waiting for the right word to wake. So tell me, what would you do if you realized the voice inside your head wasn't your own? The ocean is listening.